Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on when you are listening to this podcast. If you guys are joining us live, we thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to work on your business versus in your business. If you're watching the recording, we're just as thankful for you guys taking time out of your day. I'm Jennifer. I have my amazing co-host, Chuck. I'm not going to butcher your name today. We don't get that.
Oh, I was waiting for it.
Jokey time today. It's Chuck.
Love it. I love it. Thanks, Jen. Hi everybody. Wherever you're joining us from, I was just traveling the last couple of days, and I was gonna say, hey, I've been traveling so much, but then I'm on here with you, Jen, and I'm like, I can't even say a word because you're always on the go.
It's been an interesting week. I don't even know what states I've been in this week.
I love it.
I could tell you I'm probably running on 6 hours sleep. That's for sure.
That's it. Got to do it sometimes.
The life of the hustler. You guys, so today we were supposed to have our guest on. He had something come up, so he's not able to join us today, but does not matter. We're here live with you, and we're going to get him rescheduled when it's good for his schedule. But in the meantime, for those of you that have been following along on the podcast, we've had over the last, 4 weeks, we've had a consistent schedule of some really amazing guests who have been through some really outstanding exits, not once, but multiple times. Mm-hmm. And this series is really dedicated to helping you guys with getting some insights, some real side information, and really creating a strategic plan for your business and the future of your business. What are you going to do with it in the future, right? So Chuck and I wanted to take time today and do a deep dive into some of the things we've learned and some of the things that are really the key points that have came out of each one of those podcasts. And then when Mr. Reyes is able to join us, we'll continue with that because he's got quite an incredible story. So Chuck, you want to talk a minute about that so they make sure and tune in?
Yeah, guys, don't miss this one when he gets on. For those guys that are, been doing it for a while, just getting started doing it or thinking about starting your own trade service or company in that matter. I mean, this guy came out the gate in 2020 with COVID happening, and, he grew a sizable business in 4.5 years and took it to an amazing exit. I thought I went fast with 12 years, Jen. Like, I'm watching guys do it in less than half the time that I did it. And like, this is going to become the new norm. I really do feel that you're going to start to see people, 24 to 36 months that can do it. I mean, he didn't buy a company. He started it, opened his doors, no employees, nothing. He started the company from ground up to exit in 4.5 years, which I think is an incredible story.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That's freaking awesome. There's a lot of companies that have been in business for 10, 12, 15, 20 years that are still looking at pretty much the same balance sheet.
Yeah. Well, he surrounded himself around the right people, right? Like I'd known him the whole journey. Like, I met him in 2020, right? And he was constantly asking questions. I'm not going to get too much into his story, but it's an amazing one for sure.
So, I mean, you guys, this is, you don't just have to build a business that functions like a job and pays a little bit better than a job, but carries all the risk and liability and weight and everything else of, giants, right? There are other models. So this might not be right for everybody, but I would say that depending on what your legit goals are, if you sit back and you do, have a coming to Jesus meeting with yourself, a case study on yourself, and you try and really get complete clarity around what do you want? Like, why are you here, right? What do you want? What's important to you? If it's more time, money, and freedom, a business can get you some of that when executed efficiently and effectively with good, strong people around you and strong technology and strong processes and procedures. But if you want to go faster, you can. So I think the first thing that is wildly important that I know we've taken out of this is the importance of building a business with a future and sale in mind, whether that's the end goal or not. And what do they mean by that? All of them have said the same thing, is build your business today from the beginning as if you were going to sell no matter what, even if it's not in your horoscope.
Yeah. And Jen, I say this all the time. Like, look, if you're looking to sell a business, you got to plan 2 to 3 years ahead of time. And right, I just told you Ray did it in 4.5 years. He was planning from day one. So he had that in mind, and he set it up from day one like that. So it's so important to understand that you're not going to just turn around and wake up one day and say, hey, I want to sell my business. There's a lot that goes into it, right? So I feel that if you run your business like you're going to sell it or exit it, because let's face it, you're going to exit your company. There's 3 ways. You're either going to sell it, you're going to pass it on to family, or you're going to pass away. And why not have an exit strategy with those 3 things in mind, right? So no matter what one of those 3 things happen, you're prepared. And the other part too, Jen, is a lot of people confuse this, right? It's like, well, I don't ever want to sell my business. Okay, perfect. Okay. But imagine if you ran it like you wanted to sell it, how much more efficient, how many more things you're going to look at, how much better run this business is going to be. And look, if you want to sell a business, one of the first questions that PE is going to ask you, or any of these bigger corporations, or let's say if you just want to sell it to someone else that's looking for some passive income or something like that, they're going to ask you as the owner how much you're involved. When the owner is involved and micromanaging and he is the business, he's like, he or she, I should say, that's a huge red flag. That's like, I don't want another headache. I don't want a job. If I'm going to buy a business tomorrow, I want to buy a business. I want to buy an opportunity, not another job. And that's where it's really, everybody's like, okay, well, I got to get myself out of a truck. Yes, probably. If you're going to sell, yes, you have to do that. But the last year before I sold, one of the first things I told them, I said, I'm not here. I'm here maybe couple hours a week. I took 60 days off and went skiing this year, right? And they loved that. Who's in charge, right? Who's running the day-to-day? So it's like, yes, you do have to get out of the truck, but there's a season for hustle too. Like Ray didn't come in 4.5 years and never spent a day in the truck. No, he was in the truck. He just figured out that he had to get out very quickly and put the right people in place.
Yeah, 100%. That is that entrepreneurial hustle. That's if you don't get into the weeds, right? I refer to myself as the CEO. I'm the chief engineer officer. Yep. And engineer means there's not much in this business I haven't figured out. I didn't at some point get my hands dirty and get in the weeds and figure it out so that I could build a system, so that I could implement the system, so I could get measurable results, so I could hold people accountable. But from the first day, the goal was not to build a business around me. In fact, I fought my team about it. My team was always like, oh my gosh, everybody buys into your concept and so forth. You should sell a subscription to X, Y, and Z. And I was like, I'm not trying to trade time for money. And my goal is to design a business that doesn't need me.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
Yeah. But Jen, you still hustled, right? Like there is a time and a place for that too. So like first off, figure out where your business is at, or if you haven't started it, where you want it to go, right? So, and again, go back to plan 2 to 3 years before the exit, whichever one that is.
Yeah, waiting till the last minute and then trying to go, okay, maybe I do want to make a bigger play. Maybe I do want to take some chips off the table and do this again, but with partners that are already a little further ahead or a lot further ahead, right? This doesn't have to mean exit and sail off into the sunset. That's an option too. You can go, spend time on some island somewhere, or you can simply sell and roll back in order to take another stab at this with a better infrastructure at a higher level with bigger deals that are in front of you, right? And you can make those moves. But early preparation increases your valuation. It will also increase your bottom line as you're going through this process, regardless of which route you take at the end.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're looking to sell your business, right, this is I don't think anybody can argue with me, whether I'm looking to exit or not. If I was building a business for sale, a buyer is going to come in and they're going to look for certain things, 5 primary key functions, right? They want to understand your financial readiness. Do you have clean books? Are you doing tax planning? Are you profitable? They want to understand, are you operationally efficient? Do you have documented processes, documented job descriptions, automated systems? And the more automation you have, the bigger the difference between your top line and your bottom line is going to be. So don't weigh too heavy on only people to do everything. The third element they're going to look for is branding, marketing, and your customer base, right? Building that strong reputation, building a loyal client base, building your memberships, your subscriptions. And then finally, they're going to look at your team, right? Your talent, your technician training, the retention of your team. How strong is the team around you? I think as entrepreneurs, I didn't start off with anybody giving me a big bankroll. I was a single mom, right? Single mom. And I had a certain amount of credit available to me, right? But no one gave me a playbook and no one gave me a bunch of cash. So you usually start off doing what all entrepreneurs are, hiring all your friends and family, anybody that will work for free or cheap. Doesn't mean you're the best ones to hire.
And they usually cost you more in the end is usually what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when we're saying build your business with a future exit or sale in mind, this can't hurt you if you make these 5 things part of the core philosophy of how you build your business from day one, regardless if you know where your mind's at. I mean, I know in the first year, first 5 years, I had plenty of business coaches and even my attorney and my tax planning, and everyone would constantly ask me, they're like, but what do you want? What's your plan? What's the end goal? And I honestly didn't know. I had family working in the business. I had friends working in the business, and I didn't know. I knew I had this kind of mom, like, I want to protect my people. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, 100%. And same thing, Jen. I grew it from my garage to 130 employees. My first employee was with me the whole entire time. I hired him 3 months after I started. I had Christmas dinner with him and his family many, many years, right? Like, so yeah, there is that aspect, right? And, guys, it's such and I didn't know this the whole time. I spent 9 years, right? I spent 9 years running it like most entrepreneurs did, because the information when I started wasn't as readily available as it is today. And you know what? Like, there's a lot of information out there. Some is good, some is bad. Do your due diligence, right? But the amount of information that is out there today, I don't know why anyone would be stuck still. And I still see a lot of people stuck. Yeah. And it's like, okay, you don't know where to turn. Let me call someone. Let me find someone that'll jump on a call with me. Let me listen to a podcast. The problem is it's not the information, Jen. It's the implementation of the information.
Mm-hmm.
And, you said something amazing there, like the 5 things. Like, yeah, if you could focus on just 5 things. Okay, if you can't focus on those 5 things, focus on 2. If you can't focus on 2, focus on 1. Get that as dialed in as you possibly can, and then move on to the next one.
Yeah. The challenge is I think, naturally we tend to gravitate towards the things we're comfortable with. 100%. And you decided you were going to start a business. Guess what? You are currently wearing a badge that says, I am required to get comfortable being really uncomfortable right now. If you gravitate and the only thing you concentrate on is that which you know, this is where you either have time or money, and you've got to figure it out, right? If you have time, then you've got to choose, because what you don't have is the ability to not pay attention to any of those. If any of those pieces are off kilter, you already know if you're sitting in a business and your financial readiness is jacked up, you feel it today, bad. You already know if your operational efficiency, if you don't have documented processes, if you don't have your systems in order and systems in house, if your house isn't in order and structured and you can't hand it off to the next person that comes in, you feel that. You know if your marketing is jacked. You know if your branding, well, you might be tied to your branding for personal reasons. But if you looked at your brand from the outside in and it looks like something that's not memorable and attractive and right, you know that. You know it in your customer base. You know how many repeat clients you have. You know it with your team, right? And if one of those things is doing really well, if I have a killer brand and horrible marketing, no one's going to see it, right? Except the people you're already doing business with. If I've got great branding and great marketing, but your operational structure is not on par, you're going to be burning through leads. You're going to have horrible booking rates. You're going to have horrible close rates. You're going to have horrible follow-up. You're going to have issues. These things are all interdependent. They rely they rely on each other to work. So eventually we got to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jen, I had a understanding of a lot of the functions in my business. I was not an expert at them. Right. And what is the old saying? It takes 10,000 hours of doing something before you become an expert. Right. So like literally I had probably 100,000 hours in plumbing. I was a plumbing expert. I know, and I stayed in my lane a lot. Now, I had an understanding of how payroll worked, HR worked, scheduling worked, dispatch worked, all that stuff. But I stayed in my lane as much as I possibly could. Sales, I had over 10,000 hours. And I looked for that. And then I looked for people that had 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
That's the real key. Like, look, I have an understanding of digital marketing, but I know you're the expert and you probably have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours in it. I'm going to lean on you and I'm going to ask you questions. That's the same thing with all the information on the internet right now, right? And everybody out there saying, oh, I can do this for you. I can do that for you. Okay. Do you show me 10,000 hours that you've done this?
That's
what I'm going to look for to decipher it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Holy geez, I got messages coming in from everywhere.
Oh, I love it. We struck a nerve somewhere. That's usually when we get a lot of messages.
Did you hear that? I just had like 30 messages all at the same time. Oh my gosh. No, you're 100% right. This is so a lot of times, like let's nail down the excuses. So the excuses is I don't have time, I don't have money.
Yeah.
1, make time. And 2, start utilizing some simple tools. For example, ChatGPT. If you haven't downloaded ChatGPT yet, like get off the podcast when we're done and go to GPT and go to chatgpt.com and download that. And let's say that one of the things you've made excuses on to yourself is that I don't have time to read my P&Ls or I don't understand them. Take your P&L, sign up for a paid account. So you're not in the free system, just training the LLM, but sign up for a paid account. It's $25. Take your P&L, load it into GPT and ask it to analyze it for you. And then start asking it more questions. Say, is anything off kilter? Is anything too high? Where am I overspending? What am I underspending on? Do my margins look right? Right? What stands out to ChatGPT that you should be paying attention to? Even if it prepares you to get more comfortable in being able to find the right advisor and start asking better questions. Because sometimes we don't do things because we don't want to sound dumb or because we're uncomfortable. I don't even know what to look for. Like, I don't even know. I don't know. And so we don't, but we have to, right? This is, I was in I just got done training about 50 home service companies in St. Louis. And I asked everyone, how many of you guys have documented job descriptions for every one of them? Not one person raised their hand. How many of you have SOPs? And then we started talking about ChatGPT and they were like, well, how do I make sure my employees don't misuse it? And I was like, well, let's start with job descriptions that ask them to utilize AI whenever possible. And let's start with SOPs, which we can also generate that teach them how to utilize it, when to use it, right? And then your policy, do you have a handbook? And if we don't have a handbook, like each one of these little tiny things, like I said, they're all connected. So let's get all these fundamentals in order. But you can do these things a lot faster if you go to the table with Chuck. Like, I'm not going to advise technicians on how to sell HVAC equipment. I'm going to say, make sure you make money. and make sure you respond to consumers quickly, right? But I have no clue. I believe I think at the event I called it like a carburetor instead of a
Capacitor.
Yeah, that. I was only referring to it as a carburetor the whole time I was at the event, and they didn't tell me till afterwards. Like, that's not my gig. But when I come to the table with you, I'm going to come with as much information as I can and put it down and go, I don't know where this. I've got a client that needs help. They need coaching. I know something's wrong. They're not seeing the numbers. The leads are there. The bookings are there, but we're not seeing the closed jobs. Something's wrong. Like, I need help with that. And I'm going to come to the table with as much information as I can. And then I'm going to call on an expert that from an operations standpoint knows how to dig in and find out, why are we not closing the business? Why are we not collecting the funds? Why don't I see this money in the bank?
Yeah. Yeah. And Jen, now that I've done it in 12 years, I'm so thinking now, I'm like, okay, if Ray could do it in 4.5 year, how can I do it in 3? That's the way my brain thinks, is like, put a challenge in front of me, and it can be done. It really, really can be done. And I watched Ray's whole journey, and it's very, very impressive. So again, if you definitely have to jump on for that segment. It's not rocket science, but we fall into these traps, right? And and as business owners, we want to, tackle everything, and it becomes so consuming of our time. And it's like you said, get used to asking better questions. Even if you don't have a question, ask, what should I be asking right now? Like when I first started working with,
what haven't I asked yet that I should? I love that question.
Yep. Yeah. When I first started working with a digital marketing company, right? Like, that's the things that I would look for. It's like, okay, like, I don't know anything about it. Tell me what I need to know. Tell me the basics. Okay. That's the basics. Then I would get a deeper understanding of the basics. Now I could come back to the next meeting and say, okay, how are we tracking on this? How are we tracking on that? Right. And then I would just build my knowledge. When I first meet an expert, I'm just consuming. I am the best student possible, right?
That's hell of a trait.
And look, here's the thing too, is, Jen, you've got to, I, as a business owner, I have to wake up every single day, right? Because I now help other business owners, and I have to eat a slice of humble pie, because I don't know everything. I'm not going to claim I know everything, but what is it today that I can learn?
Be curious. Yes.
Be curious.
Be curious.
Marketing's talked about this. It's so important, because there was a time in my business 9 years in, I'm like, oh, I made it past the 2-year mark where everybody fails, right? And I'm doing really well, but I had to get humble. And it wasn't until that point that I got humble that I was able to move to another level, and very fast.
Yeah.
Very fast.
We see that all the time just in client meetings. I can listen to 2 different client meetings, similar size clients, and this will be 30 days after a major algorithm update. And I'll have one client that comes on and they're like, I noticed there's a dip in my rankings. Can you tell me why? And there's the other one that comes on and is like, you suck and you're not doing anything. And what am I paying for? And blah, blah, blah. Like, one, we got to have a conversation and say, this is a major algorithm update. We're going to have to revamp all of your content. There are things that are now hurting you, that we have a lot of work to do. So we're going to get on it. Here's our plan. Here's where we're headed. And the other one is, they're like, no, you're just selling me on stuff. No, it actually is an algorithm update, and it actually does impact your rankings. And there actually is a lot of work that we need to do. Those are all real things.
Yeah. So, yeah. 100%. But if you're
one's going to grow, one's not. One's going to cancel with us, and they're going to move to another agency and do the same thing. And they're going to do that over and over and over again. And it's really just because they weren't curious.
Yeah. I'm still super curious. I've sat in a lot of meetings. I probably have 10,000 hours of meetings with digital marketing companies, and I'm still super curious about it.
Yeah, I have to be, because this thing is changing under us like quicksand. I feel like the digital space and the technology space, I literally feel like we're building an agency in the middle of an earthquake that's the size of the entire United States, on quicksand, with somebody shooting pebble guns at us at the same time. I feel like we're taking them to the head as we're trying to, All right. Which route?
Yep. And then that's exactly it. And then the guy that's in the truck just starting a company, imagine how he feels if you feel that way, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
100%.
identifying that.
100%. They're one of the guys that was in the audience. He said, well, you just launched a website for us last year and it's WordPress site. And he was like, and now you're talking about this AI enabled website. And he was like, why'd you put me in WordPress? Well, a year ago, WordPress wasn't in a enormous legal battle. I can't predict that.
Yeah.
They weren't crumbling. I can't predict that. AI wasn't 100% prevalent, and there weren't AI enabled websites that could reach it. Like, it just didn't exist. These things are going to change. So I know that's hard. It's hard when their consumers start to change habits and behaviors and how they're going to market and how they're searching. It's hard when consumers change their expectations, right? And they're now like, well, I expect you to give me the ability to book 24 hours a day, to give me access to book an appointment, whatever way I choose. I want to reach you on 8 different devices now, and I expect a business owner to respond. None of this is easy.
Yeah.
None of it is easy.
And a really good question when you get on with vendors, what do I need to know today?
Yeah.
What is relevant today? Right?
And what's your roadmap, right?
Yeah. And what are we going to do about it?
What do we do when stuff changes?
Yeah,
What's our plan? How do we work together on this? How do
Exactly.
you notify me? What do you expect me to, how do you expect me to participate? How do I show up? How do we collaborate? What does that feel like when there are problems? Because there's always going to be problems.
Yeah.
But how do you go about it together?
Yeah. And I love that you said that, in the 5 things to do to get your business ready for an exit, you said marketing and brand in there. That's a big thing that they look at. It's, when you go under an LOI, now the clock starts where they're going to try to do everything that they can to get it for less.
Yeah.
Right? And you want to talk about a process. I guarantee if you think being in business is tough, you've been through a lawsuit, you've been through employees stealing from you, you've been through
taxes, IRS,
you've been through taxes.
Debt.
Those things suck.
Those are all real though. Just put it on the roadmap when you start a business. At some point, I'm going to have an IRS issue. At some point, I'm going to go through a lawsuit. At some point, an employee is going to steal from me.
That's all easy.
Yes.
In the sense of when you get to due diligence,
yeah,
it's that times 100. Because
right.
they want to know all of that. Plus, they want to know like your mix of services. Why did you charge little Miss Susie this 10 years ago? Like, no, not that deep, but it is a grueling process.
Right.
And here's the thing, like, you've got to be so well prepared, and not you as the owner, right? Like, I didn't answer these questions. My team answered the questions. And that's what made it that's what put me in the higher category, and why they didn't have a lot of room to negotiate. That's all it is. When you're selling a business, it's all a negotiation, and they go to the last hour. Literally, we were about to close, and they were like, well, and we were like, well, and it worked out, right? But it's really important to educate yourself, right? And I want to go back to that a little bit, Jen. Is like, if you were like me, I was getting emails and phone calls. I'm still getting text messages a year and a half later. Hey, do you want to sell your business?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this is going on, right? A lot.
Yep.
I mean, if you're in business, you're probably getting some of that. So like, educate yourself. There is definitely a right way to do it, and there's definitely a wrong way to do it. And if you're listening to this and you don't have any of that stuff in place, pause, don't go any further. Talk to somebody that's done it and get some things in place, because if you don't have those things in place, Jen, you're going to go and you're going to get in front of one of these guys that have texted, emailed, called you, or this and that, and they're going to give you an offer of some and they're going to eat you alive.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, you have to be prepared. This is going to be hopefully one of the biggest transactions of your life, and they're in the best. But they want to know everything. And literally they dig in so far that it's like, that 90-day process, and mine was fast. Sometimes these are 6 months to a year. And you can get in this process, you can be 6 months along, and it all goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk just a little bit more about being cautious, right? Like, it's great. It's the best day of your life when you sell a company. It's probably by far one of the best days of my life, besides marrying my wife and my children. It was one of the most exciting things I've ever done, right? But it is, you got to be very, very cautious and be very prepared. I know that after a year and a half, what I know now, I was not 100% ready, and I was pretty good, Jen. Like, I had a lot of things figured out, but I still know that there was a lot of things in there that if I would have known what I know now back then, I could have even made it better. So be cautious who you're working with. Whatever you do, don't ever go under an LOI without doing your due diligence, right? And ask the questions, right? Like, am I prepared? Should I, like, if someone throws out a number, it's great. It's a great number. You can live with it. Okay. Before you sign in that LOI, make sure you're ready for that diligence process. You have everything in place and you can answer everything. Because if not, they have a checklist of 1,000 different things. Every one that you get a bad score on, they're devaluating that company.
Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah.
This is, I mean, but that same checklist. So take that checklist. That checklist might be the checklist for purchase and sale or an equity or a recap event. That's the same checklist you should have as an entrepreneur, period.
100%.
Right? So that's, if you could get your hands on that checklist in advance, like, let's say you just started your company, call Chuck, call Trey, call George Donaldson, who we just had on. We've had multiple companies that have been through it or are acquiring. And all of these guys have given their phone numbers on our podcast and said, if you are interested, whether it's now or you just started, that's the question I would ask, right? If I had the ability, if I had known what I know now, we all say this, right?
Sure.
So if you're brand new, don't take this as I heard that on a podcast 6 years back. Maybe I should have learned, right? Call one of these guys who is seeking, or one of these gals, one of these companies who is seeking to acquire, and get the checklist early and start building a business around that. Right?
That's exactly what Ray did. That's why he did it in 4.5 years. He knew exactly what they were looking for, and he started to reverse engineer to it. That's all.
That's it. Game on. This is chess. Baby, let's play. This is not a haphazard business. I just come in and because I'm good at X, Y, and Z. Like, turn this into a chess game where you're making these strategic moves. You're thinking about the next 4 moves. You already know you're trying to get checkmate in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just that you're running a very successful business that provides you with time, money, and freedom, and it's for your family and for your people and everything else. Even if that's just the goal, that's great. So there's different kind of buyers, right?
Sure.
Let's talk through a couple of those. There's obviously the private equity side. There are strategic buyers.
Yep.
It may be a competitor that's acquiring through their own personal investments, or it might be an employee purchase or a sibling or family member or something like that.
Yep.
Talk to me about your knowledge, the difference between a private equity engagement versus a strategic buyer.
Well, I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it, right, Jen? You can also do an ESOP, which is an employee-owned company.
Right.
You can also put stock options in for your employees, like without doing an ESOP. I mean, there's a lot of information, and I know we don't have enough time to go through all of it. So I'll try to give you a really brief rundown of it. Depending on your size, where you're at is where, so let's say you're over 5 million and you're doing $1 million in EBITDA, which is profit essentially, or, where you're at with add backs, right? That's when you're going to start to be looked at from some of these bigger guys, or, even a competitor that may want to acquire you. That's where you're really going to start to be in the limelight of it. So, if you're not there yet, that's okay. That should be your goal, right? That should be where you're shooting for. And if you don't understand EBITDA, chat GPT that and understand it.
Yes.
that's one of the major things for it. But realistically, I mean, there's a thousand, maybe if not 10,000 ways to structure a sale. For me, I don't do anything without the experience of, again, my broker was that guy with the 10,000 hours. He was the expert in it. I picked his brain on everything. And now I am looking at, purchasing and partnering with companies. And the first thing I do is talk to him.
Yeah.
Right. Because I want to see, before we even say an LOI or sign an LOI, or before we even look at the business, go into that due diligence process, because I don't want to waste time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this looks great on paper, and then so I hit him and I say, okay, give me a brief rundown. What are you seeing that I'm not, right? And that's how you speed up. But you can partner with somebody. You don't have to have a full exit, which it has its up and downs. For me, I'm not. That wasn't a fit for me, right? So you got to figure out what you want and what direction it is. Like, look, if I was 35 years old and didn't have, young kids, a partnership would make sense for me. It's where you're at in your life that you have to evaluate and figure out what's next for you. For me, 100% buyout was the direction that I wanted to go, because I knew I wanted to move on and help other businesses get their business where they want it, and and potentially partner with companies and potentially possibly buy other companies in a different area, so that was the direction that I wanted to go in. So you got to figure out what you want there. So let's say you are that 5 million in EBITDA, and now you're thinking about going to a deal table. Okay, so what do you want your life to look at afterwards? Where are you at in your life? Do you have young kids? Are you ready for retirement? Are you younger? Do you know for sure that you can take this business in the next 2 to 3 years to another level with some financial and mentorship behind you? Those are all the things that I would look at if I'm going to partner with somebody and go forward. There's a lot more, and for the sake of time, maybe we'll get into more of that with Ray when that happens, So, but there, in both sides, like, here's what I would recommend, right? We talked about getting educated on it. Start asking more questions. Don't just jump on the first text message, phone call, or email, or the 100th one, right? Educate yourself, and then figure out what you want and the direction you want to go. You have to be super clear about that before you even start this process.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I agree. One of the things you mentioned, and something that Trey, yesterday, I think we did one yesterday or the day before. I remember one of the things that Trey mentioned that I think I'll just bring it up as probably, it was healthy for me to hear it, is he said that one of the mistakes that he made was not preparing his team to understand and manage their portion of the business by the scorecards, giving them access and ownership to be responsible and accountable for the EBITDA for their division or their portion of the business. And that was a big aha moment. He felt like he didn't prep his team to be able to have these conversations with their new partners. And that was something you could tell. He just got out of a leadership meeting, and you could tell that something in that leadership meeting really struck him, because he was like, I just wish that I could go back in time, and I wish I could have prepped all of my key players better. I wish I could have gave them the financial acumen. I wish I could have gave them the proper training. I wish I could have gave them the right resources. And it sat home with me. I will say, after that podcast, I had some different conversations internally, and that was important. But as you guys are going through this, there's different ways to value a home service business. EBITDA is obviously going to be important. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. You have asset-based versus revenue-based. There is an element that is the role of recurring revenue and service agreements, which will contribute to your LTV or your lifetime value. These are things we need to pay attention to. and comparing those things to industry benchmarks for different services. So, they know these numbers, and it's important for you to know these too, right? You don't want to compare yourself to somebody who's been in business for 20 years. Like, don't hammer yourself over the head at all, right? But knowing what the benchmarks are at different stages, at different times, that's an important factor. You got to have some kind of a benchmark that is your goal. You got to set some standards out there. So I think that's important. Um, you know, the most common mistakes, not preparing your financials early, undervaluing or overvaluing your business, or not even making valuation a part of your game plan, right? We're not planning for that. Um, Relying too much on the owner's personal involvement. We've talked about this, right? You've got to design a business that doesn't 100% rely on you. You got to get out of your own way. That is critical. My management team, I couldn't imagine not operating without them. They run the business. That's my ace boon coons. I love my directors, all my divisionals, managers, team leads, everything, but you got to design that business with people you trust, and then you got to skill them up. You got to make sure that they're given the tools. And, like Chuck, you nailed it on the head, right? Selling too quickly without competitive offers, not doing your due diligence, your own due diligence in advance of it, but not doing your homework, not doing your research. So this is like, pause in your business for a minute. Pause, get that list, call one of these guys, get the checklist, do a self-evaluation, do it with your team.
Yeah.
Right? And be honest about each one of those things. Be honest about be as factual and honest as you can that this is off. This is not on par. And if you don't know what par is, go get the benchmarks. Again, you need to surround yourself with these experts who've been further than you can even see, and you will get there faster. Velocity is in your scope.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And Jenn, I'm looking at a company right now, a plumbing company outside of Utah. I'm not going to say where. And I have the checklist, right? So we're not under LOI yet. We will be, but I have the checklist. I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I'll tell you right now, like, there's two things that I'm looking for there. I'm looking like, okay, does he have it in place, and how well does he have it in place, or she, right? And then what are the opportunities for me to grow, right? Where can I expand this? So if they're not doing whatever XYZ on the checklist, I can implement it very fast and expand it. So there is that side of it too. And there is a thing like future earnings, right? Like, if you're in your business and hey, you're growing 20% or 30% or 50% year over year every year, if you work with the right broker, the right team, they can get you money on those future earnings, right? So again, it's another huge side. But to go back, and I get asked this question all the time. It's like, do you have any regrets? Absolutely not. I was informed. I asked all the right questions. I knew exactly, and I left. I was just with my broker at an event. He did he got up and did a talk, and he used me as an example. I left a significant, we're talking millions on the table, because, and not that I don't regret it at all, but he told me up front, like, hey, if we do this, we could do this. And I'm like, no, that's not the direction that I want to go in. I was very clear of what I wanted to do in the future.
yeah.
And it wasn't about the money for me. It was like, okay, I'm gonna go here, and this is gonna give me that. But I knew it was an option, is the thing. I'm not post close and saying, hey, what about this? Why didn't you tell me about this?
Yeah.
Which is really important. And it's like, again, Jenn, I have zero regrets. I'm so excited to be where I'm at. I do believe that if you put this, and this is not a regret, it's just me just thinking outside the box a little bit. If you put my 30-year-old self in this same position, I would have absolutely partnered to go to the next level with somebody. And look, like, I grew a company to 20 million by myself. Well, I'm not going to say by myself. I had an amazing team, but with the knowledge, $20 million a year in sales, with the knowledge that I had, right? I knew naturally could have squeaked out some more. Of course I could have, right? But the way that I like to grow and scale things, it wouldn't have been fast enough for me. So I knew the next natural thing was partnerships.
Yeah.
Right. So if I wanted to get to, because it's a whole nother ball game. Once you get after 10 million, up to 10 million, it's a whole nother ball game. Then when you get to 20,
concur.
yeah. Then when you get to 20, it's an even another ball game, right? So and that's where I would have considered if I was in a different journey spot in my life, my personal life.
Yep.
I would have considered the partnerships. So
yeah. Man, it's so every stage of this, just being an entrepreneur, man, it'll give you it's a nice, good tail whooping.
it's fun though. Like get excited about it, guys. You're so like be grateful that you own a business.
I love it, right?
Yeah, like get up.
Especially you see on the
day.
news all the layoffs everywhere, the insecurity that comes, right? I'm so proud of this industry, and you guys, I would also say that this industry has, pulls all my heartstrings, and you guys are so blessed and so lucky to be in an industry that, it can't be outsourced. It can't be automated. You can automate things within it, but you guys are sitting in a gold mine. There is a reason that private equity and investors are leaning into the home services industry, because you guys picked a freaking amazing industry. Amazing industry.
Yeah. I want to point out one last thing, Jen. I know we're pressed. We're coming down to the wire on this, but look, guys, do yourself a favor. Everyone out there, guys, gals, every business owner in the trades, business owner in general, do yourself a favor. Have an exit plan, no matter what, and build your business around that. Because I've seen people suddenly pass away and they didn't have these things in place, and now their family is left with a mess. Okay, I'll tell you, one of the number one reasons why I get up and do what I do and have done for the last 25 years is because of my family, right? And I think a lot of people do that. Jen, I know you got grandbabies on the mind, right? Like that's why you do it.
And my team and their grandbabies, right?
The last thing that you guys want to do is put any pressure if you're not around. And look, let's face it, it can happen. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it can happen. You blink like that and something happens, you're putting a whole lot of crap on someone's plate. So think about that when first and foremost, whether you want to sell, pass it to family, all that stuff. Think about that one and start planning your business around that.
Yeah, I agree. That's just accountability and the responsibility we have when we decide to be an entrepreneur or have a spouse or a child, right? Yep. Chuck, you're amazing, and I appreciate you taking time to be here today. I look forward to the podcast that we have coming up with Mr. Reyes. And for everyone else, you guys, thank you so much. Keep plugging. 2025 is going to be a great year. Be intentional about what you're going to do, right? Get clarity so you can focus on the highest leveraged activities. We just went over a whole list of them on here. So that you can execute so you can win, right? It takes work. Sweat equity, baby.
Love it. Thanks, everybody.